Hello and welcome. Before we begin, feel free to subscribe and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and how are you feeling today? Your presence here truly matters. They say a house remembers. The creak in the hallway, the mark on the wall, the silence after laughter, echoes of a life once lived. I built that house with love, filled every room with years of sacrifice. And yet, one morning, I stood outside it with a packed suitcase, unwelcome in the very place I once called home. What they didn't know was, I remembered everything too. I used to tell myself that I still lived in my house, that the title on the deed was just a technicality, a precaution after my hip replacement when I was foggy with meds and fear. And my son Wesley said it would make things easier if anything ever happened. Just paperwork, Mom, he'd said. A safety net. I nodded, signed where he pointed, and went back to my recovery chair, thinking the pain in my hip was the only thing that might cripple me. I didn't realize I'd just given away the keys to my own life. The house hadn't changed much since Paul died. Same white curtains in the kitchen, same dent in the hallway wall from where Wesley once threw a basketball indoors and swore he didn't. But over the years, my name in that house got quieter. First, it was a suggestion. Maybe I shouldn't keep the master bedroom since it was closer to the front door and the noise. Then it became a decision. I was moved to the small room off the laundry, just for now, when Cora's mother came to visit and never really left. I went from having a view of the front garden to staring at the dryer's blinking lights through a half-closed door. I didn't fight it. Not then. Families make sacrifices. That's what I'd always believed. But it wasn't sacrifice. It was slow erasure. I still cooked most nights. Lasagna on Mondays, pot roast on Thursdays, Paul's chili recipe for Sunday game nights, even though no one remembered it was his. I made lunches for the kids, helped with homework, kept track of school holidays better than their parents did. But I'd become a fixture, like the coffee maker. Useful, unacknowledged, replaceable. I started to notice little things. The bank account I shared with Wesley, for emergencies, started bleeding dry. First 20 here, 50 there. I never asked, just assumed maybe there was a forgotten bill, a school fee. Then 200 went missing without a trace. When I brought it up, Wesley laughed. Must have been a glitch, Mom. You're probably misreading it. Don't stress yourself. He took the laptop out of my hands, and I let him. I let a lot of things slide. But I remember the exact moment something in me cracked. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'd just come back from the clinic. My blood pressure had been high again, and the doctor wanted to adjust my meds. My knees ached from the walk, but I'd promised to pick up the kids, and the casserole was already thawing in the fridge. I sat down on the edge of my bed. That room barely had space for a nightstand, and took off my shoes, rubbing the swelling out of my ankles. That's when Cora knocked. Or rather, didn't. She just opened the door. Can you take the kids Saturday? Wesley and I have a dinner, she said, not asked. I told her I couldn't. I had a follow-up appointment early that morning, and I wasn't feeling well. Her mouth tightened. It's just a couple of hours. I repeated myself, this time firmer. I'm not feeling well, Cora. She didn't blink. Then maybe this arrangement isn't working anymore. Arrangement. That word echoed like a slap. Arrangement. As if my entire presence in this house, the decades I'd spent building it, keeping it, filling it with birthday candles and clean laundry and patched up knees, that was now an arrangement. She left without waiting for an answer. Wesley came home that evening, loosened his tie, and stood in the doorway like a man inspecting property. We've been thinking, he started, like he hadn't already decided. You might be happier somewhere, a little more suited to your needs. I didn't answer. Not right away. I just looked at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to color outside the lines and brag about it. He went on, about how tight things were, about how I deserved better, about how maybe assisted living could give me company, structure. You won't have to worry about anything, he said, like I hadn't been the one worrying about everything for the last 40 years. Then he dropped the final brick. "We already found a place that can take you next week." I asked him if he'd made the deposit. He said yes. With what money? He didn't answer. Later that night, I opened the fridge to get some water. My pecan pie, the one I'd made that morning, was half eaten. No one said thank you. No one left me a slice. When I got back to my room, my suitcase was on the bed. Someone had packed it. The zipper was straining like it didn't want to be part of this either. My winter coat was folded on top. No note, no apology. Just a bag, a closed door, and the quiet understanding that I had been uninvited from my own life. I sat down, hands folded, the ache in my chest louder than the one in my joints. I didn't cry. Not then. But something inside me stood up. Something that had been sitting quietly for too damn long. Your move, I thought. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, and yet every sound felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the hallway floorboards, the distant murmur of Cora and Wesley talking behind their closed door. My suitcase sat at the foot of the bed, like a silent witness. At some point, I stood, pulled on my coat, and slipped out. The bus stop was 5 blocks down, past the gas station and the CVS where they never stocked my arthritis cream. I didn't leave a note. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't owe anyone that. The shelter wasn't what I imagined. No rows of desperate faces, no dramatic crying. Just fluorescent light, the kind that makes your skin look worse than it is, and the low hum of tired bodies trying to stay small. A woman with a clipboard asked my name. I said, Mary Ellis, and for a second it felt like I was introducing someone I barely remembered. They gave me a plastic bracelet and a cot. The blanket was thin, smelled like bleach and soup, but it was warm. A woman a few beds down kept muttering under her breath, keep it together, like it was a spell she hoped would stick. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, counting the water stains like stars. I didn't feel ashamed, just displaced, like someone had moved my life 2 inches to the left, and I hadn't caught up. In the morning, the woman with the clipboard, Tasha, brought me tea. It was lukewarm and bitter, but it worked better than any therapy I'd ever paid for. She asked if I had any medical issues. I listed them: back, knees, blood pressure, the usual. I didn't mention the real one: a son who thinks you're furniture and a daughter-in-law who thinks silence is kindness. I sat alone for a long time at the edge of the cot, fingers wrapped around the styrofoam cup. That's when a voice said, "You're new." I looked up. A woman in a faded pink cardigan offered me a peppermint. "Sugar helps," she said. "Makes the bitterness go down." Her name was Inz. She had a half smile and a stare that made you feel like she saw more than you wanted her to. She didn't ask why I was there, just nudged her elbow toward the window and said, "That's where the good light comes in around noon." It was the first kindness I'd felt in days. After breakfast, if you could call rehydrated oatmeal and 1 freckled banana breakfast, they moved me into a closet-sized room with a door that didn't shut all the way. "Temporary," Tasha said. Everything in my life lately was that word. She brought me into her office later that morning. Desk, plastic plant, a calendar still showing last month. "Tell me what happened," she said. I kept it short. "I got on a bus," I said. "They told me it would take me to a hotel." I didn't say who they were. I didn't have to. Tasha's eyes softened. "Did they give you an address?" I opened my purse. Lipstick, receipts, pill organizer. No address, no printout. Just trust, and I'd packed that too, apparently. She didn't press. "You're not missing," I told her. "Just misplaced." She smiled, a tired kind. "We'll start with that." Later, I sat near the window Inz had pointed to. The light did come in just right. A man with a security badge stood by the door, pretending not to hear anything unless you stood right in front of him. A woman in a blazer whispered something about beds being full tonight. I wasn't scared, just tired. But not the kind of tired sleep fixes. The kind that settles in your bones when people treat you like a favor they never asked for. Around noon, I asked to use the phone. The voice on the other end of the line at the bank was cheerful, oblivious. I told him I wanted to freeze all transactions, revoke joint access, suspend any automatic withdrawals. Yes, ma'am, he said, fumbling to catch up. Is there a specific concern? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When I hung up, I felt it. That small, sharp click of something falling into place. Later, I walked to the bakery down the block. Marta, the woman behind the counter, didn't ask questions. She just slipped an extra roll into the bag. You look like someone who needs more than they asked for, she said. I could have cried. Instead, I smiled and tucked the roll into my coat pocket. I wasn't planning to go back to that house. Not today. Maybe not ever. But I knew this. If they thought I'd disappear quietly, fade into some background blur of memories and framed photos, they were wrong. They were about to remember exactly who I was. Back at the shelter, I sat at the corner table with a piece of that extra roll still warm in my coat pocket and the cold taste of clarity sitting on my tongue. I wasn't just lost anymore. I was gathering. The next morning, I was at the lawyer's office before the receptionist had finished her coffee. Harris and McClellan, etched in the glass, looked fancier than I remembered. I didn't have an appointment, but when I gave my name, they brought me straight in. Miss Harris had kind eyes, but didn't waste them on pity. Good. I'd had my fill of gentle head tilts, and voices dropped an octave. I handed her a thin manila folder. Inside was everything I could find. Copies of the joint bank account, the power of attorney Wesley had talked me into signing after my surgery, even the birthday card he'd written last year where he joked, "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything." Now, Mom. I'd kept that card. Not sentiment, evidence. She read in silence, flipping pages with long, quick fingers. You're telling me you signed this under medication? In recovery? She asked finally. Yes. I don't even remember the notary. I just remember my son standing by the bed, smiling like he was helping. She nodded, lips tight. That document gave him full control. Property, assets, medical decisions. But he never filed a formal transfer of ownership. Until now. She turned her screen toward me. There it was. A pending real estate transaction submitted 2 weeks ago. My home, was listed as moving into a trust in Wesley's name. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. Just cold. Like someone had dumped a bucket of snowmelt down my spine. He's clever, she said, eyes still on the screen. Waited until the holidays. Waited until you were isolated. But this filing isn't complete, and as long as you still have legal capacity, which you do, we can challenge it. I exhaled. Didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. We drafted a formal revocation of power of attorney right then. She explained every line, made sure I understood. She spoke to me like I was the homeowner, the client, not someone's mother in need of permission. By the time I left her office, I had more than a folder. I had a plan. Next stop was the county library. The public computers were slow, and the boy behind the help desk looked at me like I might break something. I didn't care. I typed with stiff fingers, searching through property records, tax filings, even campaign donations, anything with my son's name attached. That's when I saw it. Another trust. Not mine. Harold Jensen. My heart slowed. Harold was a neighbor, used to live 2 streets over. I remembered him from bake sales and the 4th of July parade, always in suspenders, always walking his little dog. Last I heard, he was in a nursing home. I clicked through. The trust had been set up last spring. Same signature as mine. Same notary stamp. I printed everything, every page. Folded it carefully and slipped it into my purse, along with the revocation letter and my deed copy. My purse weighed heavier now, but it was a good kind of heavy, like armor. On my way home, I passed the grocery store and spotted Claire, my granddaughter, in the canned soup aisle. Her eyes widened when she saw me. She hugged me too quickly, like she wasn't sure if it was allowed. "Grandma, what's going on? Dad's acting weird. Said you were confused. That you're not well." I looked her square in the face. "Do I seem confused to you?" She shook her head slowly. "No. You look sharper than I've ever seen you." "Good," I said. "Remember that." When I got back to the shelter, Inns was waiting near the window seat. She didn't say anything, just patted the spot beside her and handed me a peppermint. "You smell like decision-making," she said. I almost laughed. "I went to the lawyer," I told her. "And the library." "And the bank?" "Yesterday?" She raised an eyebrow. "Look at you, stirring the pot." "No," I said. "I'm rewriting the recipe." She smiled then, full and real. "Make sure you add some heat. Otherwise, they won't taste it." That night, I took the papers out one by one, spread them on the cot like cards. Not as a threat. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge. It was about proof and power. And finally, having both in my own hands. I didn't tell anyone I was going. That was the whole point. The next morning, I put on the navy coat Paul used to say made me look like I owned the world. I gathered the papers into my leather folder: deed, revocation letter, trust filings, the printouts on Harold, and walked out of the shelter like I had somewhere to be. Because I did. Not the doctor, not the market. I was going to face them, but on my terms. I took the bus across town. Sat in the third row from the back, window seat, like always. The neighborhoods changed as we moved, from sagging porches and faded fences to stone-faced houses with wide, well-fed driveways. I knew every crack in that sidewalk by heart. Knew the sound the gate made when it latched too hard. But this time, I didn't feel like I was coming home. I felt like I was walking into a negotiation. The Lexus was in the driveway, shining like it had just been washed. Cora opened the door after 2 knocks, her face doing that strange thing polite women do when they're trying not to panic. "Mary," she said, too bright. "What a surprise." "That's the idea," I replied, stepping past her before she could block the threshold. Inside, the house looked exactly the same. Too clean, too curated, like it had been staged for an open house that never happened. A few of my old photo frames still sat on the mantel. Me holding baby Claire, Paul grilling ribs in that ugly Hawaiian shirt. I let my hand brush one of them. They hadn't even bothered to dust it. Wesley came down the stairs, phone in hand. He froze, just for a beat. Then the smile appeared, as practiced as ever. "Mom, we didn't know you were—" He trailed off. "I didn't call," I said simply. We sat in the kitchen, the 3 of us. I didn't touch the coffee they offered. Cora poured herself a cup, then barely drank it. Wesley kept glancing at her like she might say something out of line. We danced around the subject for a while, talked about my health, the weather, the school fundraiser, all the safe things people use to fill space when they know the real conversation is waiting like a dog at the back door. I didn't show the papers. Not yet. Instead, I asked about their anniversary dinner. Cora looked startled. Wesley blinked. "It was lovely," she said after a pause. "I'm sure it was," I replied, holding her gaze. "Did you use my credit card for that too?" She looked away. Wesley coughed into his fist. I let the silence settle like dust. After 45 minutes, I stood. "Thank you for the coffee," I said. "It's always interesting to see how the house is doing without me in it." Cora followed me to the door. Her voice dropped low. "Mary, whatever you think you know, it's more complicated than that." I turned. met her eyes without blinking. Life always is. Then I left. Outside, the wind was colder than when I arrived. Or maybe it just felt that way because I wasn't numb anymore. I walked to the bus stop, the folder still in my purse like a loaded weapon. At home, my new version of it, the cot and the corner shelf, I laid the folder on the bed. Everything was there, all the proof. But that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was this. They were afraid. Not of what I'd say. Not yet. But of the fact that I wasn't silent anymore. The morning after that visit, I woke with the same steady purpose I'd felt while boarding the bus the day before. Except this time, there was something else too. Resolve. Cold and clean. Like the first frost after a long, wet fall. They were nervous. I'd seen it in their eyes, in the way Wesley's jaw tightened when I said nothing at all. That was the beauty of silence. It made them fill in the blanks. And what they imagined was always worse than what I'd planned. I dressed slowly, deliberately, took time to pin my hair back the way I used to for church, crisp and neat, not because anyone was watching, but because it reminded me that I was still someone worth presenting. The blue dress, the one with the pearl buttons that hadn't seen daylight since Paul's funeral, hung over the chair like it was waiting for me to remember who I was. I didn't wear it. Not yet. But I left it there, as a promise. At 9 sharp, I walked back into Miss Harris's office. She was already at her desk, sleeves rolled up, 2 steaming mugs between us. No small talk today. She simply nodded at the stack I placed on her desk. "This one first," I said, sliding the property transfer printout forward. She skimmed it, then the revocation document we'd signed together. Her pen tapped the notary line. "Same stamp," she said, "and the electronic log shows it was filed 2 days after we revoked his power." She looked up at me. "That's forgery now. Or at the very least, fraud good," I said. "Let's make it stick." We spent the next hour drafting and filing paperwork, requests for injunctions, formal complaints with the county clerk's office, notices to the court blocking the pending property transfer. When we finished, she handed me 3 certified copies of everything. "Keep these close," she said. "If they try anything else, call me first." I nodded and tucked them carefully into the folder. 3 shields, 3 lines they couldn't cross without consequence now. Back on the street, I passed the diner where George and I used to eat after Sunday Mass. Ruthie was still working the counter, gray hair piled high, lipstick too bright for the time of day. "Well, I'll be," she said when she saw me. "Mary Ellis." "Haven't seen you in months," I slid onto a stool. "Had a few things to take care of." "Don't we all?" She poured me a cup without asking and leaned in. "Heard rumors, you know." "About your son. People say he's been sniffing around other folks' properties, offering help with paperwork. You'd be surprised how many don't ask questions when a familiar face shows up." I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. "Families," she added, shaking her head. "They'll smile at you over pie and take the fork right out of your hand." From the diner, I stopped at the hardware store. Sam, the owner, came out from the back, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Saw your boy in here last week," he said before I could even ask. "Asked about back door locks. Said he was thinking of changing one for you." My voice stayed calm. "Did he buy anything?" Sam snorted. "I told him nothing gets changed in that house unless you order it yourself." "Don't care who signs the checks." I smiled at that, thin but real. Good man. By the time I got back to the shelter, the air had shifted. Wind curling under my coat, sharp and restless, like it wanted to tell me something. Inns met me near the entrance. She squinted at the folder under my arm. "Still stirring the pot?" "More than that," I said. "I'm rewriting the recipe." She laughed, a dry, knowing sound, and then her voice softened. "Just make sure you've got your teeth in first." Sometimes they bite back. That night, I took out the tin box from the top shelf of the closet. Inside were the original deed, a few old love letters from George, and two small savings bonds I'd nearly forgotten existed. I lined them up next to the blue dress. Two anchors, one for where I came from, one for where I was going. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd make a visit, not as a mother, not as a victim, but as the owner. I didn't call ahead. They didn't deserve that kind of warning. The next morning, I dressed in silence. No rush, no nerves, just certainty. The blue dress slipped on easier than I expected. A little loose at the waist, but it still held its shape. I pinned on the brooch George gave me for our 20th anniversary, deep sapphire in the middle, like a drop of midnight. The folder went into my bag last, zip closed tight like the final button of an old habit I was ready to break. The taxi dropped me in front of the house I used to call home. It looked smaller now, less imposing. Maybe because I wasn't standing beneath it anymore, I was standing apart from it. And that makes all the difference in the world. The porch was empty. No welcome mat, no kids' shoes, just the clean, barren rectangle of a house that had long since been sterilized of anything real. I knocked twice, firmly. No hesitation. Wesley opened the door, shirt untucked, hair a little wild. He looked like he hadn't slept well. "Mom," he said. Not hi, not come in. Just Mom. Like a problem he thought he'd already solved. Behind him, Cora appeared, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't speak, just hovered near the staircase like she might float away if she moved too fast. "I won't be long," I said, stepping inside before they could argue. The living room was exactly the same, except colder. No photos of me left. No signs I'd ever lived here. Except the one thing they couldn't scrub out. The layout. I knew every inch of this place. Knew where the floor squeaked, where the paint chipped behind the curtains, where George once banged his knee building the shelf that still hung crooked over the fireplace. I sat. Opened my folder. "These," I said, laying out the documents one by one, "are certified copies revoking your access to my finances, your ability to sign on my behalf, and your attempt to transfer ownership of this house." Wesley's face paled. Cora took half a step forward, then thought better of it. "I know everything," I continued. "The trust you filed, the fraudulent timing, the notary match, and I've already filed the necessary blocks with the county. Miss Harris, my lawyer, has the originals. There's nothing more you can touch. Not this house, not my money, not me silence." For once, it was them who didn't have the words. Wesley swallowed. "It was never about hurting you, Mom. We were just trying to make things simpler." "Simple for who?" I asked, my voice calm. "You lied. You stole. You planned to move me out of my own home and pretend it was kindness." Cora stepped in now, defensive. "We were going to tell you." "You already did," I interrupted. "When you packed my suitcase and called it an arrangement. When you used my money for your vacations. When you signed your name where mine should have been." I stood up, slow but steady. "There's a police report being filed this afternoon," I said. "Not for revenge, just accountability. And I've also spoken with Harold Jensen's guardian. If you've done this to others, they'll know soon too." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was fear. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't need to. Some exits speak louder when they're quiet. Back at the shelter, I didn't unpack. I didn't sit on the cot. Instead, I took the last of my savings, what they hadn't touched, and booked a flight to Sarasota. I'd always dreamed of Florida. Not for the beaches, but for the light, the kind that melts stiffness from your bones and lets you feel like maybe there's still time to grow something new. I bought a small place, a 2-bedroom cottage with peeling paint and a lemon tree out front. The agent was confused why I didn't want to haggle. I told her, "Because it's mine." I sent Claire a postcard with a picture of the water and a pelican. On the back, I wrote, "Sunlight looks different when you choose it yourself. Love, Grandma." Sometimes she calls. Sometimes she writes. She's learning what it means to be loyal not to blood, but to truth. I never heard from Wesley again. Not after the visit from the police. Not after the trust filings were exposed. Not even when the court revoked the last of his rights to my estate. That's fine. I didn't come here to be remembered. I came to start remembering myself. And in the mornings, when the sun hits the lemon tree just right, I make tea and sit on the porch in my blue dress. Not as a relic, not as someone left behind, but as the woman who walked out of her own erasure and wrote the ending herself. Quiet. Clear, final, and free.